So I've decided to make a part two to the immigration video I made before because I realised there's a lot of areas I want to cover I didn't have time to cover in the last video. Um, in terms of how many immigrants we take, it's a bit of a myth that we Western countries take the most. Actually, the highest concentration of immigrants in the world are in countries like are often in the Middle East. Jordan has a massive influx of immigrants, often from the Palestinian territories and Syria, I believe. Turkey has a huge influx of refugees. So does Pakistan. So it's not quite true that Western countries have the highest influx. Um, Nevertheless, there are powers I believe should carry their burden a lot more. Saudi Arabia, for example. Russia, although Russia has a massive problem with far-right racism. I mean actual racism, racist attacks. And yes, China. Now, the reason I keep mentioning China is there's this argument that, oh, China's overpopulated, that's why they can't. No, I don't accept that. There's many parts of China that can take North Korean refugees and doesn't, and don't. They send them back across the border. That shows Chinese values versus Western values. The West is more tolerant. That's obvious. There's also wealthy countries like Japan and South Korea. I'd like to know why they're not taking more refugees. True, the distance is further, but they're wealthy countries. I don't see any reason why they don't take some burden that Western Europe and North America is always expected to take, and Australia. Saudi Arabia is a wealthy state, it could certainly take more. So there is, I think, legitimate concern about where refugees go. I'm talking about refugees here as opposed to economic migrants. The UN, I believe, specifies that they should go to the nearest safe haven, which is why during the Balkan Wars a lot of refugees went to Italy. I believe we have a humanitarian duty to help people who are fleeing war and persecution. I really do, especially if we've taken a strong stance on it on the world stage. So, for example, if we were to take in Ugandan gay rights activists, I think that would be legitimate. But the issue of immigration, by the way, I think the figure of 212,000 is far too high. I would support the government's target of 100,000, but the problem is actually getting that sort of target is very hard to achieve. Because not only is there the problem of illegal immigration, but there's also, it's just very hard to regulate. I also believe there needs to be a more humane approach to how we hold people at detention centres, because you have cases of pregnant women and children being held and like treated like criminals. I don't believe in treating illegal immigrants in the same way as like common street thugs, because in many cases these are desperate people who just want a better life. I'm not condoning what they're doing, but you know, you have a situation in the Mediterranean where people are risking their lives, and often there's tragedies. We often see at Lampedusa. The same story between Indonesia and Australia. That shows the extent these people will go to get a better life in Europe. So we should have some humanity in this, and far too often you have rags like the Daily Express talk about illegals. They dehumanize these people. Now, I stand by the argument about whether migration is too high, and I don't like the political correctness that's involved. At the same time, I don't like some of the language that the tabloids use, like illegals. It's a dehumanizing sort of language, and the problem with that is it does then lead to ultimately racist attacks and a rise in the far right. Having said that, you know, my stance on this issue is neutral. I believe that it can benefit a country, and let's not forget one of our greatest sons, Isambard Kingdom Brunel. He was the son of a French refugee, so immigrants have contributed to this country. I'm sure there's Mo Farah, of course, is another example, or Olympian runner. You know, there's many examples of people who have contributed to this country. But I just think it's wrong to brand someone racist for asking questions about immigration. In terms of the integration issue, I believe it's joint responsibility. I believe in when in Rome, do as the Romans do. I really do. And I would always say to any foreign friends, you know, I want you to have a good time here. If you're going to abide our laws, if you're going to respect our values, and you're going to contribute to society. But I also feel that you should make efforts to integrate. And I do think it's a bad attitude that some people come here and they don't. That's a problem. And there is legitimate question, for example, parts of inner city London just don't resemble the UK. You know, and there's absolutely no values of Britishness in those communities. Now, some people might say, well, that's BNP language, but if you look at somewhere like Newham or Tower Hamlets, there's not only a very small percentage of English speakers in some of those areas, but there's also an active hostility towards the United Kingdom. You know, that's a serious problem, and it's something that we cannot go unchecked. And when you have a situation of Muslim patrols occurring in London, I don't know whether those people are British born or not, but when you have issues like that, then you can see there's a serious problem with integration in this country. By the way, the 4 London bombers were all British born, but there's an issue there about immigration. Integration. So just some thoughts.